There's a constant project.
Yes. They need it again too. You can tell the comment.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. I've started the recording. It takes usually about a minute to kick in. We've got a couple of folks still coming in. I'm going to grab the screen share real quick from your worshipful brother. And before I do that, though.
Do you need me to do anything on my end?
Nope, I can just...
He has the power.
Mentoring committee always has the power.
True.
All right.
Yeah, see Dylan.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to the continuation of the Grand Lodge webinar series. We have a great program for you this evening. Welcome, everyone. Let me make sure this is... All right, so just taking a look at... I went too far here. Let me go back a slide. First things first, this isn't a tiled meeting. Please keep that in mind as we're going through the session this evening. These are being recorded. As I mentioned, it takes a little while for them to kick in, but it should be working now. So during this, we ask that you keep yourself on mute during the presentation so that the presenter can make sure that there aren't any background noise interruptions. If you have any questions to send, be sure to send those via chat. We'll cover them all at the end. And then just a little bit before the conclusion, we'll send out the poll. Make sure that you submit that before you leave. And then we've got the, come on. Here's the upcoming schedule. So this evening, we're going to be treated with a talk on the golden ratio. Coming up on Thursday, we have the Art of Delegation by Worshipful Brother Justin Thompson and Worshipful Brother Christopher Wendover. And then we have Colonial Freemasonry and fundraising beyond the pancake breakfast next week. So make sure that you're going to the Grand Lodge website and signing up for those as well. And now, this evening, for the first time, we have something that we're trying to do from the, I guess, the four committees: membership, mentoring, leadership, and communications. This originally came about through the membership portal, but we have here Worshipful Brother Brad Phelps. Can you unmute and explain this a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, 2020 has been an interesting year, to say the least. And so this is really presented, the Show and Tell Challenge, to get brothers to collaborate on building content with an opportunity to win the commemorative plaque based on the responses to the 3 questions you see here. There is a supporting website that gives background information to anybody who may be interested. And after tonight's session, I'll stick around for any questions anyone may have. And I look forward to seeing people's submissions.
Hey, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you send that information to me and I will put it out in the next issue of Minnesota Mason in my column?
Absolutely, yes. I will send the notes, and just so you know, there is an introductory article up on the Grand Lodge site right now.
Fantastic. The more we promote things like this, the more people will participate.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you, Brad. And now I'll hand over the sharing function to Worshipful Brother Andrew. And are you able now then to share yours?
Yes.
Derail. Perfect.
Although I've managed, before this I had the pictures and stuff over on the side of everybody talking, but that's okay. Most important thing, I have my slides. And a man armed with a PowerPoint and a way to hit forward is a often dangerous thing. I'll try not to be that. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight on a beautiful, beautiful evening, at least where I am. Who knows, it's probably raining cats and dogs where you may or may not be, or it has been or will be, because that seems to kind of be the night it is here in Minnesota. Want to talk tonight a little bit about the golden ratio and how the golden ratio can be seen to be applied in so much of what is around us and what we can perceive. Of course, the first question is what is it? And there are a lot of differing definitions in more and more complex manners. We see essentially a derivation of the Euclidean finding. You can see it's fairly long there.
Worship brother, are you sharing out? Because I don't see
I thought I was sharing out.
interrupt. I apologize.
No. I was sharing earlier, and then you took over. And
I
then
took over, and let me
You have to reshare again.
just grab your screen share and
let me escape and go back to screen share again. Of course, now I've got to find it again. Here we go. Now, is it visual?
it is.
Okay. We will try this again. There we go. Hopefully somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, we're good. As I said, here's the big definition. I won't repeat it all. You can all capable of reading that and trying to visualize that. The mathematical form can be seen either as the magic number being 1.618 carried out indefinitely. Mathematicians use the letter either phi or phi. I prefer phi because that's the way I learned it in what rudimentary Greek I picked up. And it's like, well, that's really nice, but what do we really mean? Simply the ratio goes, if you have line A, B is 0.618 the length of A. If you have a complete line of A, B and C will have that same ratio, where B becomes 1, C becomes 0.618. It's almost 2/3 of the overall length would be, say, B and 1/3 A, but it's not quite. Here's an easier way to look at it. If you have a rectangle and then you divide that using that concept, you get a smaller rectangle. That ratio was considered by Euclid to be the golden ratio. And that ratio can be further applied if you graph it out with an 8x8, 5, 3, 2, 1. Now, if you further plot those lines, you get a Fibonacci curve. And you can see how it's expressed here. And if you look down, you see the basic A, and then B is 0.618 of A. The 13 is 0.618 of 21, and it goes down and down and down. It's kind of interesting mathematically. And I say this as somebody who was trained in the social sciences, not in mathematics. I used mathematics considerably in my profession, but it was one of those things that was hard fought for me. The mathematicians and the engineers among you are like, yeah, well, of course, everybody knows that. For me, it was a little harder. What we have seen, interestingly demonstrated, is that this plotted out curve can be seen to be reoccurring in nature. We can see it within the cosmos, and we do recall that there are certain things that we as Masons are encouraged to learn, astronomy being one of them. And we can see this in the spiral nebula depicted here. Natural occurring phenomena that happen just on the face of our planet. The classic counterclockwise rotation of a hurricane seen from above, a hurricane in the northern hemisphere seen from above, also plots out in classic hurricane form to that same spiral. Biology can also be seen to have repeated this very same phenomenon. That's pretty amazing when you think going from the universal constant of our cosmological universe to natural weather phenomena to biological phenomena, all repeating the same mathematical constant. It's one of those, makes you think and start to think about cosmological connections. Also zoological. The chambered nautilus, look how it grows. It's pretty self-evident. We see this constant curve with the same mathematical proportions. Now, the Greeks were the ones who are credited with having come up with this, and they applied this in some of their great, magnificent works, including those using the fabulous Doric column, although that would be almost argued to be near Tuscan, but we won't get into that. That's another one of my hobby horses. But you can see in the proportions of the Parthenon, from both top to the middle and from the bottom up, the same proportions were used. And of course, many to this day argue that the Parthenon is one of the most proportionally perfect buildings ever constructed by man. There is the argument that the pyramids that the Egyptians constructed are similar, but their proportions actually are not quite exact. And those who argue for the Egyptians say, well, they didn't have exactly precise measurements, but when you look at the measurements on the stones and stuff, and as I discussed in one of my presentations in print on the use of some of the architectural tools, did a pretty good job. So we're going to say they were working on it. They had the idea, but not quite the execution. Interestingly enough, it is argued that the golden ratio can be seen in places where there may not have been the exposure. Now, the other argument is sociologically and culturally, the Moguls were actually very well versed in what Western mathematicians and stuff were discussing, and were able to work on such things. Here's the Taj Mahal, and you can see the sections can be divided up into the same ratio. Of course, our operative brethren knew exactly about this. And of course, the facade of the of Notre Dame before, of course, the horrible fire. But you can see very much as they constructed each story and each part of it, they kept in mind these visual proportions that are considered to be incredibly visually pleasing and satisfying. And the reason being because it reaches to a natural constant that we are exposed to in nature, in the skies, in all that is around us. And so we are naturally disposed to appreciate these proportions and look at something like that and say, wow, that's really pleasing, without maybe being able to articulate why. Art, of course, the great Renaissance painters taught this in a lot of their work. And if you look at many of the works, especially the late Renaissance and the early post-Renaissance, you'll see, and even in some of the later landscape artists, these same proportional divisions in scenes and in their paintings and within them, where you see once again the golden ratio repeated. And of course, Da Vinci being one of the greatest minds of the last 2 millennia, he certainly saw it. And you can see in his great depiction of the human body, the same ratios applying. And it is remarkable how these ratios do repeat themselves within our very DNA. You can see it within the composition of the individual parts of the body. This proportion of what is considered the perfectly average human face. You see once again, the ratios repeat themselves and repeat themselves and repeat themselves. When I first learned to draw the human figure, that was one of the things they taught us, was the fact that, for example, our eyes are about halfway up the overall length of our head. You think of them as being up here, but no, we actually have less or more up here. But that's the basic human look. You can see it, of course, within, and you can, I know a lot of you are now going like this and going, hey, gee, that's pretty cool. And you can see the ratios laid out here in both the arm and within the own human hand. So, is this a universal constant? Is this indeed something that is truly everything, which makes us think that the grand architect did indeed intend this very remarkable joining of mathematical and natural? Well, as we can see, really Euclid discovered it. At least that's what we were told by Pacioli back in 1509. Kind of fell in, fell out. People used it, architects used it. But Zeising, really, in the 19th century, was the one who started to apply it. But his works, when you look at them, there are a lot of things that he said existed that it didn't really fit. More importantly, in the last 30 years, there's been a couple of studies, one at Berkeley and one at Stanford, where they exposed people to things that were intentionally set to the golden ratio and things that were not. No difference in what people found to be pleasing and not pleasing. So there's a question, they argue, whether or not this truly is a natural preference. And that's one of those things that we as Masons always should seek to look at and look to see, we're told this is so. Is it so? Just because we're told does not necessarily mean it is. Oftentimes they are great truths, but sometimes great truths may not necessarily be as great a truth as we're told they are. But that very professor who wrote the Stanford one said, we're creatures who are genetically programmed to see patterns and to seek meaning. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We as Masons seek greater meaning. And if we seek to see things and interpret things to the golden ratio, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong, but we are seeking meaning. And the answer would be, it is the seeking of meaning that really truly gives us knowledge. And I will leave you with this. If you look down at your keys, depending on whether or not you have a classic 101 keyboard, you can see that it can be argued they put the golden ratio right in there. I'm going to leave this up now with the question that I'm really looking at. This quest as much as finding the answers. And perhaps looking for the golden ratio is part of that drive to seek greater knowledge. and that it lays not as much in man's striving and desire, which could be argued to be something that was left to us by the great architect, more than perhaps a simple genetic code. Or it could then again be indeed a genetic code that has been left in us by the great architect to find, see, and discover these things. And for those who seek a little more information, here's a little bit of my resources that I used in this to develop it. And with that, I will leave it to some questions. With me screen sharing, I don't think I'm able to see the questions, Joseph. So you may have to see if anybody has any questions, comments, or as usual, denunciations.
Right. Thank you, Worshipful Brother Andrew. I'm going to go ahead and release the poll. And right now we don't have any chatted questions in, but at this point, if you would like, you're free to unmute yourself and go ahead and chime in with some questions. I personally find the golden ratio fascinating, simply because it's surprising to me just how much it shows up in nature. I mean, I can see maybe some disposition towards something like that for human beings creating art, but for just biology, zoology, and things like that, it surprises me that it's there as much as it
really is, isn't it? You know, when I first started putting this together, I was thinking in terms of architecture, and then the more I delve into it, the more I found other things. It was really remarkable. And then in the end, finding those two studies that kind of said, wait a minute, maybe not. And in a way, it really reinforced other aspects of what being part of the craft is all about, at least to me, and things that it's kind of fun to share. And if you come away just at least looking for proportional ratios and things, well, that's good. Just like I have now been conditioned to look at every column I ever see and try and put the class to it.
I find myself doing that same thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just looked up on the Google and put in the golden ratio, and there's quite a few articles.
Oh yeah.
So
Been written about.
this is a good starting point to
Yeah.
investigate.
Wind up going down some fairly esoteric rabbit holes, and some that will even lead you to the, well, that's because of the alien DNA that was left in us, and others who take a little more spiritual point of view, which is great. Anything that keeps you thinking and looking, that's fantastic. And I think there's a few others who'd like to sell you something too.
I have another question that came up the other day. The proportions of the pyramids in Egypt
Mm-hmm.
to be important, and
I'm
supposedly one
sorry,
theory
but
is
my video and sound went out, so I'm wondering if I did anything on my phone.
Is this Timothy? I'll chat him in. Go ahead, guys.
Oh, anyway, I've heard one theory that if you build a small pyramid to store things in, and if you use the right proportions, things like milk or yogurt will last longer in it, compared to not being inside of a structure or a enclosure that's the shape of a pyramid. Have you heard any truth about something like that?
I believe that was a busted myth, but you might want to continue your Google search. I do it right now, but I'm afraid that I will be doing something dreadful on Zoom.
This came up with relation to, was it the 31st degree in Scottish Rite? It's the
I
Egyptian
don't remember.
degree.
I know, of course, with 31st degree, but I'm trying to recall. I mean, I do
Well,
remember
it's
where they were selling.
it's not part of the degree, but
I can neither
it's
hear
Egyptology.
nor see.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've heard that, and I seem to recall like Mythbusters or something bought a few of these things and they built them and things rusted and did what they did. But I know that there's a whole school of thought on the mathematical proportions. I remember vaguely from a very long decades ago, late night satellite TV kind of thing. There was a long lecture that I stumbled across that was looking at the mapped interior of the Great Pyramid at Cheops in Giza outside of Cairo, and was arguing that it actually was the angles and stuff and everything put it as a kind of cosmological calendar, and you could predict various things through it. But I think because it was late night on satellite TV, it may have been a little more speculative, we'll say, than perhaps factual, but it was sure as heck entertaining.
Yeah, the number 5 is in the pyramid, Andrew. So if you take the half of the base and declare that a unity of 1, then the hypotenuse is 1.61, so it's 5.
Yeah, I'll have to look up where I saw the argument that some of the pyramids do not fully.
That's correct. Not all of them. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, but most of them actually do.
Yeah, which would make sense when you look at it from a engineering point of view, how you would share do load bearing.
That was the reason. Yeah.
So it's one of those arguments that they probably knew why they were doing it, but it may have taken Euclid to figure out the precise formula. And of course, there's the argument, no, Euclid stole it from the Egyptians. But you can always blame Euclid. Anyone have any other comments or reflections on tonight's presentation?
Is this on or available at a source location, as I think some of the others are? If it is, could you repeat that so we can track it down later?
But this lecture?
Yes.
No, I have not committed this yet into our archives, but of course we're recording this tonight, and I will work and make a note here to seeing about triumphing over our Google storage system and getting it laid up in the Grand Lodge archives.
Thank you.
Sure.
Also, I know I must drop out. It's 2 minutes till the start of our Lodge Zoom. It's Tuesday night, and Tussler is going on the air at 7:30. So thank you very much. The presentation was of a perfect length so that we didn't miss anything, but it's time for us to cut out to join our other group. Sadly, they're too close together, but so far it's been pretty workable.
Thanks
Thank
for
you very much.
Yeah, I have to leave too for the Tussler one, but Tussler postponed their meetings till 7:30 so we could get the Grand Lodge information. But we had not more of the members come for the Grand Lodge thing.
There you are.
That's life. But nice talk.
Thank you very much.
Bon voyage. Here we go.
If anything, Zoom has, or this event has made a lot of us much more technologically comfortable in the last few months. And that is a good thing in and of itself. People have learned stuff.
That is very true. I do web conferences all the time for work, and I've used a variety of platforms, and if anything, it's taught me to be more flexible. But yeah, any other questions for the presenter, Worshipful Brother Andrew?
Well, thank you, Worship Brother Andrew.
Log them or put them to sleep. Either one works.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And if you get a chance, go to the Grand Lodge website and sign up for the other webinars later this week. But again, thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you most especially, Worshipful Brother Andrew, for the fantastic presentation.
My
I hope
pleasure.
everyone has a
Enjoyed it.
fantastic evening.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
You guys take care.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't have a question, but it was still interesting.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Andrew. It was very insightful.
Good
Much
content.
appreciated.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Believe me, it was a lot of fun to put it together.
Have a good night, all.
All right, brothers. Well, I'll take off. Have a good night.
And Timothy, are you there? Timothy, can you hear?
Sure.
He's tried several times to log in. I asked him if he could exit